What's up, boys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm on NBA 2K23, and for scientific purposes, I'm going to see what the NBA would be like if no whites were ever allowed in it, starting from 1983 until the end of the 2023 season. I know what you're thinking. The NBA is already blacker than a Popeyes in Mississippi, so why would it even matter? Well, tell me this. Who's going to hover around the three-point line on offense? Who's going to bring the star athletes a cold bottle of Gatorade during timeouts or rebound for them during shoot-arounds? Those little things with good personalities can make a big difference in the grand scheme of things. Since we'll be starting in 1983, the butterfly effect will be astronomical. And the 80s were a different era. It was a time where white guys made the NBA without being raised in European basketball factories or having a growth disorder. It was a time where politics were left out of sports, but in reality, the NBA stayed alive thanks to the race war they created through the Celtics and Lakers rivalry. So honestly, without the whites in the 80s, we probably wouldn't have the NBA today because there wouldn't be enough hardworking, sneaky, athletic, high IQ ball players for the time's fan base. But we're going to see how this goes anyway. First of all, this wasn't easy to do. I started with the 1983 roster and had to take out about a third of the league since 2K fills in their roster with auto-generated players. And keep in mind, it's no whites allowed. That means Latinos and Asians are fair game. If in the past America has used their ancestors for cheap or free labor, they have a spot in this league. Asians, for example, share the same setbacks as whites today for their ability to get into college, but they earn their spot through the dark corners of US history, such as the Transcontinental Railroad and those summer camps we kept them in during World War II. So Yao Ming and the other three Asians will be featured in this simulation. Then to keep the whites out for the rest of league history, I had to correct 40 NBA drafts and use the corrected versions during the entire thing. And save yourself a trip to my shithole comment section because light-skinned NBA players will be allowed as long as they have one parent of color. That includes some real close calls like Stephen Curry, Blake Griffin, Mike Bibby, and Jason Kidd. The best players missing from the 1983 roster includes the highest overall player at the time, Larry Bird, and the Celtics are fucked if you couldn't tell because Kevin McHale is also gone. Isaiah Thomas will be missing his enforcing big man Bill Laimbeer, and Dan Issel is gone, so Jeffrey Dahmer is going to have some competition. In total, there are 12 white NBA players that will be deleted from the 1983 roster that are 80 overall or higher. Some players getting deleted from the drafts in the 80s include John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek, so the Jazz don't have a bright future. Another Dream Team member, Chris Mullin, is out of the 85 draft, and also notably missing from the 80s are Detlef Schrempf, Arvydas Sabonis, Rick Smits, and Steve Kerr. The top team in the 83-84 power rankings are the 76ers with Moses Malone, Dr. J, and Mo Cheeks. Next are the Lakers, who are only missing a few players, but the Celtics dropped to 4th and are now being led by Robert Parrish. And the Bullets are the worst team in the league, with their top player being a 78 overall. The MVP of the first no-white season is Magic Johnson. Really no surprise. The league should be his for the next decade as long as he doesn't put his wand in every living creature with a hole. The 76ers finished first in the East with 62 games, and the Lakers set a record for the time with 71 wins and 11 losses. Darrell Griffith led the league in three-pointers made for the season with 9. These guys are going to have a rude awakening once these light skins start to sneak into the league. The NBA needs some time to adjust, so it was no surprise it was the Lakers and 76ers in the finals. The Lakers won the first championship of the no-whites NBA 4-1. The 1984 draft is one of the most important ever, even without the whites, and the Washington Bullets had the first pick and took Michael Jordan. That is the worst team in the league by record and overall. It looks like MJ is trying to do the LeBron challenge, so I'll make sure to keep an eye on him. And the Kings had the ultimate Kings moment. They chose Charles Barkley over Akeem Olajuwon, who ends up on the Bulls. Of course, Charles isn't a terrible choice, but they put their trust in LaSalle Thompson over one of the best centers of all time. In the 84-85 season, Magic is still the highest overall at 98, but Kareem, on the other hand, at 37 years old, is down to a 91. Magic was the back-to-back MVP, and Jordan was the Rookie of the Year, averaging 28 points per game. But more impressively, Akeem won Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie. The Lakers went 72-10, the second best record of all time, second to themselves, and Magic is a 99 overall entering the playoffs. The Pacers, a team that loved white guys a little bit too much during the 80s, just set the record for the worst season yet at 14-68. Jordan and the Bullets were swept by the 76ers, and I was keeping my eye on Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons. They're one of the teams that can challenge the Lakers right now, but it's not looking like it because Isaiah Thomas is out with an ankle injury. And then Moses Malone gets taken out with an ankle injury as well, so they lose to the Bucks. If any of these teams are going to have a chance against the Lakers, they need to get out of their Converse and get into some high-top Kobe's already. Sidney Moncrief isn't taking down the Showtime Lakers. The Lakers are back-to-back champions, and Magic is the finals MVP, giving him the trifecta for the year. There's a solid conspiracy about the 1985 draft that ended up giving Patrick Ewing to the New York Knicks for a better media deal, and this one was not much different. The Mavericks just turned into a dynasty overnight thanks to the Nuggets and Cavaliers. They have the first and second pick. They got Karl Malone and Patrick Ewing without even qualifying for the lottery. It's a perfect situation for them. They say everything is bigger in Texas, which will hopefully apply to Karl Malone's taste in women. And the Rockets chose Joe Dumars at 3rd. Jordan is the 5th best player in the league, but the rest of his team is suffering the effects of the crack epidemic in DC. The Mavericks look like the team to take down the Lakers. Mark Aguirre is a 93, and at least one of their top 2 2 picks should eventually pass 90 overall. Moses Malone is the first person to win MVP besides Magic. Ewing was Rookie of the Year, and Hakeem repeated as Defensive Player of the Year. The 76ers and Lakers are still the top teams in each conference. The Pistons made it to the second round again with 97 overall Isaiah Thomas, and he broke his wrist. The Mavericks blew a 3-0 lead to the Lakers in the conference finals, and the Lakers win for a third year in a row, beating the Hawks 4-1. However, Kareem just retired 3 seasons earlier than he did in real life. I'm pretty sure he hates white people, so the whole no white NBA thing probably got old for him real quick. The 86 draft is pretty bad without the white guys. It's one of the few years you can honestly say that. The Bulls are the #1 ranked team coming into the 86-87 season. Hakeem is a 92 overall. They also have 87 Buck Williams and Xavier McDaniel, who looks like the MJ from LA Fitness. Following the Bulls are the Lakers and Mavericks. Isaiah Thomas has some help after the Pistons took Dennis Johnson from the Celtics. Meanwhile, the Bullets are still ass and the Celtics are still ass. In the 1984 draft class's 3rd season, MJ was MVP, Hakeem is Defensive Player of the Year, and Charles is 3rd team All-NBA. One of these is not like the other. The Hakeem Bulls were first in the East, going 58-24. Jordan needs to calm down if he wants a ring. The Bullets suck, yet somehow they're second in the East. And for the first time so far, the Lakers are not the top team in the league. The Mavericks went 60-22. And shout out to the Nets. They almost broke a record, going 16-66, being led by Otis Birdsong. The Jordan Bullets lost 2-3 to the 7 seed Bucks, but the Bullets shouldn't be in the playoffs in the first place. The Clippers finally dethroned the Lakers. They beat them in 6, being led by Terry Cummings and Manute Bol. The Pistons lost again, and I don't know what war crime Isaiah Thomas committed to be this hated by 2K. He's out again, but with a broken toe. And the Mavericks, without their starting point guard and shooting guard, defeat the Clippers and Hawks to be the first team to win a championship that isn't the Lakers. The Afro era is over. Acid is out. Coke is in. Bob McAdoo, Truck Robinson, Dr. J, and Artis Gilmore retired after 1987. The Supersonics had a 7.5% chance of getting the first overall pick, but they get it, which is a game changer because they chose David Robinson with it. Reggie Miller goes second to the Knicks, which is ironic. Scotty goes third and joins Joe Dumars and Ralph Sampson on the Rockets. And with all due respect, Jordan might have a chance in Washington. His new top teammate is going to be Mark Jackson. The 88 Nets broke a record for the worst team in this simulation, going 13-69. The second round of the playoffs had a few good matchups. The only champions so far, the Lakers and the Mavericks, are going against each other. And in the East, Hakeem and the Bulls take on MJ and the Bullets. The Bulls took out MJ in 5, and the Mavericks blew another series lead to the Lakers. The Clippers are still the only team to take out the Lakers in the playoffs. They take them out in 5, and Hakeem makes the finals for the first time in his career just to be swept by the Clippers. I don't know how the Clippers did it. I wasn't even paying attention to them until now. They have 91 Terry Cummings, however 86 Clark Kellogg was their finals MVP. They are pretty deep in the paint. They have Horace Grant, Dennis Rodman, and Manute Bol coming off the bench for them. In the 88-89 season, the league expanded to Miami and Charlotte. Hopefully this will help MJ win a few championships like it did in real life. The Nets, the worst team in no whites NBA history, managed to fall to the 6th pick, partially due to the expansion teams. Another draft year I don't care for, with or without the white guys. Danny Manning went first to the Knicks to join Reggie Miller. The Pacers took a fake player at 2nd, and the only Hall of Famer from the 88 draft, Mitch Richmond, went 4th to the Miami Heat. It's the last season of the decade, and the power rankings didn't change much. It's still the Bulls at #1, followed by the Mavericks and Lakers. The Rockets had a good thing going, but Ralph Sampson left them to join Clyde Drexler on the Trailblazers. Should it matter much in the long run? I'm pretty sure his knees are going to blow out sometime soon anyway. And I don't know how they're pulling this off, but somehow the Nets are worse than the 2 brand new expansion teams. Hakeem Olajuwon again won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. Thanks to the addition of David Robinson, the Supersonics finished first in the West, going 62-20. For the 3rd year in a row, the Bulls finished first in the East, going 59-23. And poor Isaiah Thomas, this guy has to be on suicide watch by now. He hurts himself in every playoff run he makes, and in the year the Pistons won the finals in real life, they are now last in the league. Jordan has his best team yet, but they still lost to the leftover black men from the Celtics dynasty. The Mavericks took out the defending champs Clippers and the 1 seed Supersonics. Hakeem and the Bulls made the finals for the 2nd year in a row, but the Mavericks beat them in 7 and won their 2nd championship of the decade. Before the 90s start, there are 2 more teams entering the league, the Orlando Magic and Minnesota Timberwolves. The top pick in the 89 draft went to the Nuggets, who chose Sean Kemp. The Nets made a pretty decent decision in Sean Elliott at 2nd. Maybe they aren't retarded after all, but they did pass on a Hall of Famer in Tim Hardaway. That concludes the 80s. The West won all 6 championships this decade, 3 to the Lakers, 2 to the Mavericks, and 1 to the Clippers. Only 2 players won Defensive Player of the Year, and it was surprisingly Muslim. Magic and Hakeem won 2 MVPs, Moses and MJ won 1, and the top players of the decade, in my opinion, were Magic, Hakeem, and Kareem. The 90s bring on a couple of MVP white guys in Steve Nash and Dirk, but they're going to have to stay home and sell insurance in this reality. Still, there are some of the greatest players of all time joining the NBA this decade, like Shaq, KG, Kobe, AI, and Tim Duncan. The Bulls fell off hard from the power rankings to start the 90s. Budget MJ, also known as Xavier McDaniel, left Akeem for the Heat, and Isaiah Thomas is still crippled. David Robinson won his first MVP in his third season, and Akeem won his 6th Defensive Player of the Year award in a row. The Supersonics had the best record overall. The Nets aren't even trying anymore. If anyone should be forced to move to OKC, it should be them. And the MJ Bullets are first in the East with only 2 players above 80 overall.
Stop it. Get some help.
The Lakers and Mavericks meet again in the second round, but Patrick Ewing is out and the Lakers advance to the finals. It was looking like it was Jordan's year, possibly a Magic versus Jordan face-off, but the Heat take them out in 7. The city of Coke owns the city of crack, but AIDS owns them all. The Lakers win their 4th championship, and Magic wins his 3rd finals MVP. The Pistons had an awful year, but Isaiah Thomas is playing chess while MJ is playing checkers. They get the first pick in the 1990 NBA draft, and they take Gary Payton. The god-awful Nets take Derek Coleman at 3rd, yet they go on to trade away their highest overall player and a first-round pick for Kendall Gill. And then they make it worse by trading away their 3rd overall pick, Derek Coleman, for the 12th. They came away with a 75 and 73 overall while giving away 2 young 80 overall players. Maybe they're tanking for Shaq or Kobe, or quite possibly they have autism. Stay tuned to find out. The Lakers are still the top team with Magic and James Worthy. The Rockets are now the only other team with multiple 90 overall players in Scottie Pippen and Joe Dumars. And Akeem has a hernia. Never seen that before, but I've also never seen someone win 6 Defensive Player of the Year awards in a row. He's a man of mystery. Magic wins his 3rd MVP of the No Whites League in what should be his last season before the announcement, and Akeem wins another Defensive Player of the Year award. The Lakers have a league best 65 wins, and the Nets have the league worst. Who could have seen that coming? The 91 playoffs were an odd year, but the Kings went on a tear. They took out the David Robinson Supersonics, the 2 franchises with the most rings, the Lakers and Mavericks, and beat the Hawks 4-3. I thought the Kings were dumb for picking Charles Barkley over Akeem, but out of the 1984 draft, he ended up being the first to win a ring, even though he was carried by this mediocre team. The Magic had the first pick in the 1991 draft and took Larry Johnson. The Nets took Dikembe Mutombo, so they'll either bounce back with him and Sean Elliott or waste their primes and trade them away for a family-sized pack of Oreos. It looks like Charles is ready to retire at 28. After winning his first championship, he left the Sacramento Kings for the Orlando Magic. This is the most random set of awards yet. Karl Malone won his first MVP with a pretty average stat line. Charles Barkley won his first real award as 6th Man of the Year for the Magic, and the 7-year streak of Akeem winning Defensive Player of the Year comes to an end as Clyde Drexler becomes the first guard to ever win it. Scottie Pippen and the Rockets were first in the West with 51 wins, and the Charlotte Hornets were first in the East with one of the worst rosters in the league. The Nets still have the worst record in the East, which could pay off with Shaq entering next year's draft, but the Timberwolves beat them at their own game, going 14-68. The first round was full of upsets. James Worthy is out with an Achilles injury, and the Lakers lose to the Trailblazers. The 2-seed Mavericks lose to the Clippers. The 1-seed Hornets lose to the Bucks, but I saw that coming from a mile away. And the 2-seed Knicks lose to the Akeem Bulls. In the second round, the 1-seed Scottie Pippen Rockets get swept by the David Robinson Supersonics, and for the first time, Jordan gets past the Miami Heat and is in the NBA Finals against the Supersonics. It's a pretty even matchup of David Robinson and not much versus Jordan and not much, but the Supersonics win it in 6, and David Robinson is the Finals MVP. Jordan really needs to leave after his next contract is up if he wants to fund his gambling addiction with his shoe brand deals. This year was a disaster for the entire league. Hopefully Shaq will come in and take over starting next year. You know how I said maybe the Nets are tanking for the 92 draft? Well, I overestimated them. They don't even own this year's pick. And the Cavaliers jumped from the 5th best odds to getting the 1st overall pick, which lands them Shaquille O'Neal. Alonzo Mourning goes 3rd to the Timberwolves, but the Nets do end up with Latrell Sprewell out of this draft after trading away yet another first-round pick. Coming into the 92-93 season, the MJ Bullets are the team to beat, followed by the Supersonics, and the Pistons are now the 3rd and one of the few teams to have 2 90 overall players with Gary Payton and Isaiah Thomas. The Olympics would have been the summer before this, but I still wanted to put together a dream team for the 92 Olympics with this roster. The starting 5 is pretty much the same, but obviously John Stockton, Chris Mullin, Larry Bird, and Christian Laettner need to be replaced. It's a no-brainer. Magic is going to be the starting point guard at a 96 overall. 95 overall Jordan and David Robinson would be the starting shooting guard and center. Scottie Pippen is the best small forward at 92 overall. Karl Malone is only an 88 overall, but he has predator strength, plus he's won an MVP and championships in recent years. The first player off the bench and replacing John Stockton is 93 overall Isaiah Thomas. He should have been on the dream team in the first place if it weren't for Jordan being such a cunt, but neither of them have won championships yet, so they'd have to get over it. Clyde Drexler remains on the team as a 92 overall. I've got 91 overall Gary Payton replacing Chris Mullin, and give me Mark Aguirre to replace Larry Bird. He's been the main rival of Magic Johnson. He's won multiple rings. He's past his prime, but it'll make for some cute photos. Patrick Ewing is staying on the team as a backup center at 89 overall. Charles Barkley is ass, so I'm gonna have to take Dominique Wilkins at 89 overall. To this day, I don't understand why Christian Laettner was ever considered for this team besides carrying the bags. If it was going to be any rookie from the 92 draft class, I want Shaquille O'Neal. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this team is shitting on the original Dream Team and having a lot more fun winning gold. For the 92-93 season, David Robinson was the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. The Bullets are finally on the right track. They had their worst season since Jordan was drafted, going 30-52. And the Lakers had an awful season as well, so the 93 draft might make things a little more interesting for Jordan and Magic. Out of all the Eastern Conference teams, I did not expect the Magic to be the first team to win an NBA championship. They took out the Shaq Cavs, the Hakeem Bulls, and the Sean Kemp Nuggets. Charles Barkley left this team, so he missed out on a second free ring. They were led by Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Sidney Moncrief, and Larry Johnson. Moses Malone and Bernard King retired, who didn't do much in their no whites allowed NBA careers, but they did manage to accomplish one important thing. They outscored the second to last cracker in the top 10 all-time scoring list, Jerry West. The Lakers took Penny Hardaway with the first overall pick, who is an almost identical player to Magic Johnson. The Timberwolves had a solid choice in Chris Webber, and the Nets, well, the Nets fell for a made-up player named Dexter Gilmore and missed out on Jamal Mashburn, Rodney Rogers, and Vin Baker. After recent player progressions, the Pistons are now the top team coming into the 93-94 season and the only team with 290 overall players. For the first time yet, Magic is no longer the highest overall player in the NBA. Jordan is now the highest at 95 overall, who's turning out to be the modern-day Damian Lillard. Hakeem is now a Muslim Hornet, and Charles Barkley is ring-chasing again on the Timberwolves. David Robinson was the back-to-back MVP, and Hakeem won his 8th Defensive Player of the Year. In 1994, the Supersonics beat the Reggie Miller Knicks in the finals, giving David Robinson and Dennis Rodman their second championship, although due to injuries, Kenny Walker was the finals MVP. Never heard of him. The 1994 draft wasn't that great. The most impressive thing to come out of it is that the Nets managed to waste another pick on a fake player and passed on Jason Kidd, who was drafted 4th by the Jazz. Shaq went on to win his first MVP and gave the Cavs the best record in the East, averaging 32 points a game, and David Robinson won his second Defensive Player of the Year, leading the Supersonics to the best record in the West. Jordan completed his yearly tradition of losing to the Miami Heat. Isaiah Thomas is past his prime, but he's healthy and has a great teammate in Gary Payton, but Shaq and the Cavs swept them and moved on to the NBA Finals to face off against David Robinson and the Supersonics. Shaq only has Charles Oakley and Mitch Richmond helping him, but they managed to take down one of the oddest big threes ever formed in David Robinson, Dennis Rodman, and Charles Barkley. Shaq was the Finals MVP, which gives him the second ever trifecta since Magic Johnson and the 85 Lakers. The league is expanding again before the 95-96 season to Canada, with the Raptors and Grizzlies joining. The Pacers have the first pick, and the Nets once again waste another year. They gave away the number 2 pick to the Suns. The Pacers took Kevin Garnett, and the Nets gifted the Suns Rasheed Wallace. But the Nets managed to make it worse. They traded away 82 overall Kendall Gill to the Bullets for another inbred looking fake player to lead them to last place. Thanks to the Nets, the 95-96 Bullets look like they're giving Jordan his best chance yet to win a ring with 380 overall or higher players on the roster. And the Hornets are now a borderline super team after Scottie and Hakeem teamed up. Chris Webber is by far the most random player to win MVP yet, and Shaq was robbed of winning it back-to-back. He led the league in points, blocks, and was second in rebounds. Hakeem won his 9th Defensive Player of the Year. He's won it 75% of the time since he's entered the NBA. Magic Johnson lost his starting role to Penny Hardaway by the 96 playoffs. The Hornets and Bullets were each eliminated by one game, and we were cucked of a MJ versus Hakeem and Scottie series. And the Cavs beat the Sean Kemp Nuggets to be the second team to go back-to-back since the Showtime Lakers. And in the most important draft of the decade, one that can turn a franchise around overnight, the Nets were tied for the best odds but dropped to 5th. It's looking like another decade of therapy for them. The Warriors were given the first overall pick, but they take Ben Wallace, which lets the Kings steal Kobe Bryant. And in the best trade yet, the Clippers trade away 86 overall Terry Cummings and 82 overall Muggsy Bogues for the 3rd overall pick. And they didn't pull a Nets. They took Allen Iverson. Ray Allen goes 4th to the Raptors. The Nets take Sharif Abdur-Rahim, which isn't awful, but not a Hall of Famer like the first 4 picks. And the Clippers once again make a wise trade, which lands them Jermaine O'Neal to go alongside AI. To no surprise, the Cavs and Bullets are the top 2 teams after Shaq becomes the newest highest overall player in the league. The Kobe Kings look like another MJ situation, and the Warriors passed on Kobe because of their trust in Chris Morris. The Nets took Dikembe Mutombo's manhood and wasted his career. They traded him away after turning him into a 60 overall. David Robinson wins back-to-back MVP and Defensive Player of the Year awards, but Allen Iverson not only won Rookie of the Year, but led the league in scoring with 30 points per game. The Jazz swept the Celtics in the 97 finals, with their 2 best players being Jason Kidd and Vin Baker, who the Nets passed on in back-to-back drafts. The Bulls get another great big man with the first pick in the 97 draft in Tim Duncan, and the Magic get Tracy McGrady. The Timberwolves become the only duo of 90 overall players with Chris Webber and Alonzo Mourning, and of course Charles Barkley is there riding their coattails. Just like my father, Gary Payton left the Isaiah Thomas Pistons for the younger Milwaukee Bucks, and the Orlando Magic are starting to look like a future super team. David Robinson had another year of MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, but Moses Malone, I did not see that coming. He won Coach of the Year for the Jazz, going 62-20. The Shaq Cavs get sent to the gulag thanks to Tim Duncan and the Bulls. Tim Duncan managed to bring the Bulls all the way to the finals in his rookie year just to twist his knee and watch the Grizzlies win their first championship. The Knicks take Vince Carter with the first pick in the 1998 draft, and Anton Jamison is joining AI and Jermaine O'Neal on the Clippers. Coming into 1998, David Robinson is now the best player in the league, which was previously Shaq, and Jordan isn't even the best player on his team in one of the years he won a championship in real life. Vin Baker won MVP, and if I'm being honest, I didn't know this guy existed before making this. This was a dark era of no whites allowed NBA, no pun intended. The Vin Baker and Jason Kidd Jazz only lost one game on the route to winning their second championship in 3 years, and Vin Baker somehow has the third trifecta year ever, joining 95 Shaq and 85 Magic. Speaking of, Magic Johnson retired right before the end of the decade and finished first in all-time assists, and coming off a championship, the Jazz took Sean Marion fourth in the draft thanks to the Lakers. This draft didn't have many great players, but if the Clippers didn't have enough felonies already, they took Lamar Odom with the 7th pick. The no-white 90s were a very even decade that was dominated by big men, and it was dehumanizing for great guards of the era like Kobe and MJ. David Robinson was the best player of the decade by far, winning 5 MVPs, 5 Defensive Player of the Years, and 2 championships. Shaq forced Jordan to sign a shoe deal with Puma after he joined the league and won back-to-back championships and final MVPs. And Hakeem is still a cheat code entering his 3rd decade in the league. He won 4 more Defensive Player of the Year awards in the 90s. The 2000s draft classes feature white guys that will be more remembered for their podcasts and their basketball careers. This might be the weakest era of white NBA players of all time that gave a generation of private school kids a type of sports idols that inspired them to stay in school and off the court. Outside of the Gasol brothers, I don't think you'll be able to tell that anybody's missing. Yet the 2003 and 2009 drafts are the best of the decade and some of the best ever that could turn a franchise as bad as the Nets or Kings into contenders. Entering the 2000s, the Jazz and Supersonics are the best teams in the league, and Kobe Bryant surpassed David Robinson as a 94 overall, yet his best teammate is a made-up 80 overall player. And the Hornets are now just old and depressing. Vin Baker was the back-to-back MVP, and KG won his first Defensive Player of the Year. The 2000 playoffs didn't feature much star power, but the Magic stopped the Jazz from repeating, being led by Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Mark Aguirre, the Black Larry Bird, retired from the Lakers. Charles Barkley retired with one of the most mediocre careers, and based off his accolades, it looks like he'd be taking the role of Kenny Smith on Inside the NBA. Michael Jordan is still chasing the grind with the Wizards, but managed to break the all-time scoring record, and by now the top 10 all-time scoring list is officially cleansed of all white players. Not a big fan of this year's draft class. Kenyon Martin went first to the Spurs, and Young Long Soo from Ukraine went second to the Warriors. I'm going to assume this is a Chinese man that has been seeking refuge in Eastern Europe. For the first time ever, the Pacers are the #1 team in the power rankings. They had the 2nd worst season of all time in the 2nd season of the No Whites NBA. Their lack of diversity in the 80s took them 17 years to recover from, but KG was able to revive this franchise. The former MVP Chris Webber left the Timberwolves for the Warriors, so there are no teams with multiple 90 overall players. Hakeem left the Hornets for the Nuggets with Sean Kemp, but at 37 years old, it doesn't seem like he'll ever win a championship. Vin Baker won his 3rd MVP, and the Jazz went 71-11 this year, which is the best record since the 1985 Lakers. Ben Wallace won Defensive Player of the Year, but for the 76ers, so the Warriors passed on Kobe just to lose Ben Wallace before he even entered his prime. One of the interesting things about the 2001 playoffs is that the top guards in the league, Allen Iverson and Jason Kidd, are both out 6 to 8 weeks with injuries. Somehow the poverty franchise Nets finished 2nd in the East with Sharif and their gang of made-up players. They went on to take out the 2-time champions Magic, but never stood a chance against the Vin Baker Jazz. Out of nowhere, these Black Mormons seem like a dynasty to start the millennium. Isaiah Thomas, Clyde Drexler, and Hakeem retired after the 2001 season, combining for an astonishing 0 championships. Gilbert Arenas' criminal record would have been more suitable for the Clippers, but he landed on the Trailblazers with the 1st overall pick. Tony Parker is another close call whose heritage I had to double check, but even if somehow he wasn't black, he definitely has more street cred than Richard Jefferson. There are still no teams with 290 overall players, but the big change this year is that MJ followed Hakeem's steps and is trying to mooch a ring off a mediocre Nuggets team. MJ's had a rough go in this simulation. Even a paralyzing skiing accident would be nothing compared to what the Wizards did to him. 2002 was all KG except for Shaq robbing him of a perfect year by winning Defensive Player of the Year. KG still won MVP. The Pacers finished 1st in the East. They lost 2 games in the 1st round to the Hawks, but from there they didn't lose. He accomplished what MJ and Kobe have been trying to do their whole careers and ended up with the 4th trifecta in league history. Michael Jordan called it quits after the 2002 season. His biggest accomplishment was winning MVP in 1987. He did finish with a 2,000 plus lead on the all-time scoring list, but still at best he's a glorified James Harden with without Steve Kerr and Tony Kukoc carrying him to greatness. Patrick Ewing also retired with 2 championships, and he holds the all-time block record with just 21 blocks more than Kareem. The Mavericks pulled off the biggest draft houdini yet. They got the first overall pick with a 3.7% chance, and they went on to replace Patrick Ewing with Amari Stoudemire. The Wizards took Yao Ming at second, and with the lack of racial controversies in this league, calling the greatest Chinese basketball player of all time a wizard would seem a tad racist. In the 2002-2003 season, the Clippers are looking like the team to beat with AI, Odom, and Jermaine O'Neal. Meanwhile, the Kings are getting revenge on Kobe by filling their roster with Special Olympic athletes. Tim Duncan won his first MVP, and Alonzo won his first Defensive Player of the Year. The next draft class is stacked, and there was more tanking going on here than there is in Kiev. Kobe made it to the second round, but the able-bodied Clippers beat them in 6, and they were finally able to take down the Utah Jazz. The 1-seed Clippers and Celtics went to Game 7, and Lamar had a 47-point game, so I decided to watch Game 7. And it turns out Lamar Odom plays like the local freak athlete crackhead. If he touches a ball, he's shooting it up like Demi Lovato's forearm. Doesn't matter if it's a good shot, because when he's hitting, he looks like KD, and if you try to dunk on him, he'll elbow you in the face. Him, AI, and O'Neal went up 15 points on the Celtics before the end of the fourth quarter, but I witnessed the greatest comeback of all time. It took the no whites NBA 20 years to figure it out, but Sean Elliott became a pioneer of the sport and started knocking down threes whether he was contested or not. He almost single-handedly brought them back in this game, although some credit is due to AI helping Boston win. He was throwing up shots like he was throwing chairs at white people. Overall, it was a bad career choice for him. The Celtics came back in Game 7 and won the 2003 championship. Kurt Thomas, whoever the fuck that is, was the finals MVP, but Sean Elliott had 4 3-pointers in the fourth quarter alone. Reggie Miller, David Robinson, and Scottie Pippen retired, but only David Robinson won any championships. Reggie Miller didn't make the Hall of Fame, but finished first in 3-pointers with almost a lead of 500. This league just does not appreciate light skins. The poverty Nets, they can't scout talent to save their life, and they haven't had an ounce of luck yet, but with the 8th best odds, they get the #1 overall pick in the most important draft of the decade. Even the Nets can't mess this one up after all the hard work of sabotaging themselves and the rest of this league. They get rewarded with LeBron James. The Lakers drafted Dwayne Wade at 2nd to join Penny Hardaway. Chris Bosh is joining Yao Ming on the Wizards, and Carmelo Anthony falls to 4th to join Amari Stoudemire on the Mavericks. The league has just drastically changed overnight, but 2004 still belongs to KG. His best teammate is 82 overall Eddie Jones, so he decided to have the best year in no whites NBA history. He won MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, led the Pacers to the best record in the league, won them a championship, and the Finals MVP. This is the first year of its kind. So far, no one has ever won all 4 major accomplishments. KG is somehow on track to be the best player of all time. The last expansion team is added to the NBA after the 2004 season. Hopefully, the Bobcats can put an end to KG's terror. The only important player to come out of the 2004 draft was Dwight Howard to the Rockets. The Trailblazers are the #1 team going into the 04-05 season, being led by Gilbert Arenas and Corey Maggette. And Jermaine O'Neal is an absolute traitor. He left the stacked Clippers to be on this mediocre Magic team. Gilbert Arenas won his first MVP in 2005. KG won Defensive Player of the Year for the 2nd consecutive year, and this is terrifying. Yao Ming was the most improved player, and somehow, some way, 84 overall Michael Redd led the league in scoring with 32 points per game. Turns out this season gets weirder. Dwayne Wade broke the single-game playoff scoring record with 64 points in the first round against the Spurs. The Spurs made it to the finals just to meet the LeBron Nets and lose in 5, but Sharif Abdir-Rahim is the finals MVP. The 05 draft is pretty forgettable in my opinion. Chris Paul ended up still going to the Hornets, and that's all that matters. For the first time since 1997, there are 2 90 overall players on the same team with LeBron and Sharif on the Nets. Gilbert Arenas won back-to-back MVPs, averaging almost a 34-point triple-double. The Clippers made the finals again, but lost to the Knicks, who have Vince Carter and Elton Brand. The Kings had the first pick in the 2006 draft, and joining Kobe is Rajon Rondo. And joining Chris Paul on the Hornets is LaMarcus Aldridge. Coming into the 06-07 season, LeBron and KG are now tied for the highest overall players in the league at 94. Kobe is now down to a 93 by the time he gets an ounce of help. The Mavericks have nearly 3 90 overall players in Jason Richardson, Carmelo Anthony, and Amari Stoudemire. And I was joking about the brand new Bobcats dethroning KG, but out of nowhere, they are a much better team after acquiring Tracy McGrady and Dwight Howard in free agency. Gilbert Arenas became the 2nd ever player to win 3 MVPs in a row, joining 99 through 01 Vin Baker on the Mount Rushmore of basketball. 07 Kobe was pretty good, but he was no Michael Redd. The top players of the league faced off in the first round of the 07 playoffs, but the KG Pacers pulled the upset on the LeBron Nets. The Super Team Mavericks upset the 3-time MVP Gilbert Arenas Trailblazers, but the West has somehow been dominated by Kenyon Martin and the Spurs for the past few years. And in the East, Gary Payton and Stephon Marbury get their first chance in their careers to win a championship, but the Spurs won it all in 5 and sent Gary Payton into retirement ringless. The 2007 draft is a pretty good one, and the Supersonics jump from 7th to 2nd for another chance of stealing KD. But this isn't the Trailblazers we're talking about. The Suns take Kevin Durant 1st overall, and the Supersonics take Greg Oden at 2nd. And the Hornets already have Chris Paul, but they still take Mike Conley with the 3rd pick. LeBron becomes unanimously the best player in the league after he increases to 96 overall and KG drops to 94. LeBron won his first MVP, averaging 34, 10, and 9, and KG tied David Robinson with 5 Defensive Player of the Year awards. KD brought the Suns team from 18 wins to the conference finals with only the help of the severely underrated Michael Redd. The Clippers and Bucks went to Game 7 in the finals. AI was out with an injury, so Lamar Odom had to take over and win the Clippers their first championship in 20 years. For the 2nd year in a row, the Thunder jumped 5 spots forward in the draft, and with the 1st overall pick, Derrick Rose joins Ray Allen and Greg Oden, which can be a dynasty granted that they have enough icy hot. And the 76ers pull a Nets. They take a fake player and let Russell Westbrook fall 3rd to the Utah Jazz. The Suns had a great free agency. They added Baron Davis and Ben Wallace, and this team is terrifying on paper. They went on to beat the Wizards in 7 in this year's finals, and to make this team even more lovable, Moses Malone is their coach, but he's 5 feet tall. The 2009 draft is loaded. Stephen Curry went 1st overall to the Heat. James Harden went 2nd to the Warriors. Blake Griffin went 3rd to the Timberwolves. DeMar DeRozan went 4th to the Grizzlies, and you can't forget Taj Gibson at 5th to the Thunder. The 2000s were dominated by young talent and the Nets' bad decisions. They finally discovered the three-pointer, but Stephen Curry is about to show them why they say light skins do it better. It was the first decade the East won more championships, and just like in real life, super teams are starting to take form. Without whites being drafted in the 2010s, the wave of stretch 5s and Eastern Europeans are going to have to never exist. Missing them in this era is only slightly noticeable until Markieff Morris still has a spine and Devin Booker doesn't have a father. Coming into the 2009-2010 season, the Nets are the #1 ranked team, and credit to LeBron, he always finds a way to represent China. The Mavericks still have their set of 90 overall players. The Knicks have 2 90 overall players for the first time ever with Vince Carter and Elton Brand. And Jermaine O'Neal is a whore. He had a good thing going on the Clippers, but he's now on his 4th team in 13 years. To start the 2010s, LeBron won his 3rd MVP in a row and his 1st Defensive Player of the Year. The Super Team Mavericks won 70 games for the first time since the 01 Jazz, and by the playoffs, they are the first team in no whites allowed NBA history to have 3 90 overall players. They rolled over every team in sight and beat the Wizards in 5 to win the 2010 finals. After 18 years in the NBA, Shaq retired with 2 championships, but sadly his career was overshadowed by the great Vin Baker, who won 3 MVPs and 3 championships. The 2010 draft is a very good one. DeMarcus Cousins went 1st overall to the Raptors. The Grizzlies fell for a fake player at the 2nd pick and passed up on John Wall, who will join Derrick Rose on the Thunder, and Paul George fell to 5th to join Stephen Curry on the Heat. Entering 2011, Kobe has by far his best team yet, with Rajon Rondo also being a 90 overall, and Amari Stoudemire left the defending champs for the below average Bobcats, which means the Kings and Knicks are the only 2 teams with 2 90 overall players. 2011 was the year of Kevin. KD won his first MVP, averaging 31 and 11, and KG won his 7th Defensive Player of the Year. The Mavericks looked like they were going for a repeat, but Stephon Marbury and the Bucks broke the Isaiah Thomas curse, taking down the Mavericks in 4. The Pistons stole the first pick in the 2011 draft just to take one of the widest systematic players in league history. The Hornets have a point guard addiction. Kyrie Irving is joining CP3 and Mike Conley, even though they could have had Jimmy Butler or Kawhi Leonard. Yao Ming left the Wizards for the Warriors, who are now a very solid and diverse team. Mike Conley wised up and left the Hornets for a promising Raptors team with DeMarcus Cousins and Jimmy Butler. Kevin Durant was the back-to-back MVP in 2012. Kawhi was the Rookie of the Year, and LeBron won his 2nd Defensive Player of the Year award of his career. The KD Suns were upset once again by the Yao Ming Warriors, but Gilbert Arenas can't have gun charges in 2K, so he led the Trailblazers to the finals and stopped the Bucks from repeating in 2012. Everyone knows LeBron has one of the highest basketball IQs in NBA history and an underwhelming dick ever since his return to Cleveland, but he really impressed me here. The first year Stephen Curry leads the Heat to the 1st seed in the East, he takes the entire year off for a good reason. The Nets get the #1 overall pick and take Anthony Davis, so this decade is over almost as soon as it started. The Nets are back up to 2nd in the power rankings, even though they have 2 60 overall guards starting for them. Chris Paul is now ring chasing in Phoenix with Michael Redd and his sidekick KD. The Pistons look really promising, but it's Detroit, so they'll probably lose their rosters to a warmer and safer franchise city. Gilbert Arenas is still holding the league hostage. Coming off a championship, he won his 4th MVP. John Wall was 6th man of the year, which means the Thunder would be a dynasty if they could just figure out how to make either Rose or Wall play the shooting guard. The Curry Heat won the NBA Finals against the Kawhi Grizzlies, but not to worry, Lee GM is grooming AD to get him a few more rings. Of all the drafts, I wish I would have rigged this one because Giannis went to the Bulls Bulls instead of joining Kyrie in New Orleans or Dame in Houston. The Nets became the #1 power ranked team after getting the MJ of Taiwan, Dwight Howard, but to be fair, Russell Westbrook is now the best player in the league as a 96 overall. Still in 2014, LeBron won his 4th MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. Gilbert Arenas won his 2nd Finals MVP for the Trailblazers, taking out the DeMarcus Cousins Raptors in 7. Tim Duncan retired with the peak of his career being the MVP he won in 2003. Joel Embiid is the 1st overall pick in 2014, joining Tony Parker on the Spurs. 30 years later, and the Wizards are still trying to recover from the mistake of drafting MJ. Julius Randle may or may not be the man to do it. Coming into the 2014-15 season, there is an all-time high of super teams with 5 teams having 2 or more 90 overall players. In 2015, LeBron tied David Robinson for the most MVPs ever won with 5, and this is why tanking works. The Nets swept the Curry Heat, the Giannis Bulls, and beat the Spurs 4-2 in the finals, which ended up giving 2015 LeBron the 2nd quadfecta ever, joining 04 KG. The 2015 Hall of Fame class was very strong, but the only player to retire this year leading in an all-time stat is, of course, Michael Redd. And the next couple years are entirely LeBron and the Nets. They are the 2nd franchise to win 3 in a row, joining the Showtime Lakers. In 2016 and 2017, LeBron won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. 2016 wasn't even competitive. They went 71-11 and only lost 1 game in their finals run. After 2017, Kobe finished with an almost identical career to MJ. He even tried getting carried on the KD Suns, but left the league with 1 leg and 0 rings. Stephon Marbury legitimately had a better career than Kobe in every way possible. He even finished 1st in all-time scoring with 38,000 points. In this span, the Rockets drafted Dwight Howard 2.0 with the 1st overall pick in 2016, and in 2017, Jason Tatum went 1st to the Wizards. The Nets don't win a championship in 2018, but they still have by far the best duo with prime LeBron and AD, and they are the first team to make over $1 billion in a year. LeBron still won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in 2018, but the Nets' reign was cut short by Curry, PG-13, and the Heat. The Heat lost in the finals to the Timberwolves, who have terrifyingly good team chemistry. The thickest butt in the league is feeding 2 big men with some of the worst sexual decisions of human history, but hey, God gave Kyle Lowry 2 holes for a reason. For some odd reason, Gilbert Arenas wasn't retired after 2018, but they still inducted him into the Hall of Fame. This might have led to the 2018 draft being rigged for the Trailblazers. They went from 9th to the 1st pick and took Trae Young. Keep in mind, there's no Luka in this draft, so Ayton went 2nd to the Magic, and the Grizzlies are looking really good with Shea, DeMar, and Kawhi. But DeMar ended up leaving for the Grizzlies for Russell Westbrook on the Jazz. And the only active Hall of Famer ever was traded to the Clippers for little to nothing. LeBron once again won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, but the Nets were taken out by the Bulls in the conference finals. Hakeem couldn't do it, Tim Duncan couldn't do it, but Giannis is built different. He gave the Bulls their 1st championship after 36 years of no whites. In the 2019 draft, the Bucks got Ja at 1st, the Pacers got Zion at 2nd, and there's a steep drop off as Bruno Fernando goes 3rd to the Jazz, which left Darius Garland to the Kings and RJ Barrett to the Grizzlies. The early 2010s were competitive, but LeBron ruined it by forming a super team that even Curry couldn't really compete with. So far in the 2020s, there hasn't been much white talent entering the league, but without some of these new players, it will be easier on the eyes. In 2020, Giannis put an end to LeBron's MVP and Defensive Player of the Year streak, and out of nowhere, Bull is the next Shaq. He was the Rookie of the Year for the Cavs. LeBron is still being haunted by the Warriors. James Harden was the Finals MVP, and LeBron is still tied with Magic with 4 rings. The Orlando Magic take Anthony Edwards with the 1st pick, and LaMelo Ball goes 6th to the Cavs to form a super team with Bull. For the 2nd year in a row, Giannis was MVP and Defensive Player of the Year for the Bulls. The Nets are really falling from grace now. Again, they lose to Giannis and the Bulls in 7. We get a KD/Giannis matchup where KD ends up giving CP3 a free ring. Gilbert Arenas retires again and again is inducted into the Hall of Fame. Coming into the 2nd to last season, the Nets are now being led by Anthony Davis, but that's exactly why you tank. The Magic have such a good looking team, but then there's this thing staring at you at power forward. And the Mavs have been so consistent throughout this. They still have Melo and a bunch of young talent. D'Angelo Russell was the MVP of the 22 season, averaging 30 points a game. Still, he has to be by far the worst MVP of this entire thing. And to make things weirder, he and his teammate Zion Williamson were 1st and 2nd in scoring. Yet it was another year of LeBron. They took out the Curry Heat, D'Angelo Pacers, and beat the Nuggets in 5. Coming into the last season, Mo Cheeks and Moses Malone finally retire as head coaches, which means they've been a part of this league for 39 years. They would have been retired on a beach somewhere if 2K was just capable of taking out Magic with HIV. In the last draft, the league is really starting to be whitewashed by now. The light skin from Iowa, Keegan Murray, was drafted 1st overall to the Hawks, and Paolo went 5th to the Pistons. Keegan was Rookie of the Year, which was a shocker in such a strong draft class, and KD won his 3rd MVP for the Suns. ones. And the Orlando Magic won their third championship against the Kawhi Grizzlies in the last season of No Whites NBA. Both these teams are stacked, but that's a wrap for this simulation. With no water boys / whites in the NBA, a lot of the all-time great guards had much less successful careers. The league was entirely dominated by athletic big men from the start, and that seems like a fairly accurate depiction of how it really would have been. LeBron retired after the 2023 season as the undisputed GOAT. If I were him, I'd say fuck playing with Bronny and Bryce too if I won 9 MVPs and 5 championships. LeBron also finished first all-time in scoring after just clearing 40,000, followed by Carmelo Anthony, who is still active, then Gilbert Arenas and Stephon Marbury. The highest scoring performances through the 40 seasons were Dominique Wilkins with 70, Jordan with 68, and Michael Redd scored 65 twice. Stephen Who, Michael Redd set the record for three-pointers made in a game with 15 in 2007, and he has the record for the most made in a season with 482. The Nets are somehow the worst and best franchise of this entire thing. LeBron saved them and won them 5 championships in 20 years. The Lakers were second in championships with 4 that all came in the first 7 years of the league, and the Mavericks, Magic, and Jazz had 3. The best players of all time in the NWA NBA based off MVPs, Defensive Player of the Years, Final MVPs, and championships are LeBron, David Robinson, KG, Hakeem, and Magic. But someone might have to make room for Michael Redd in there. His accomplishments just never showed up through awards, but this league ran through him. With 1 MVP, I have Jordan below Kurt Thomas at 33, but at least he's on the list, unlike Kobe. He's not on the Mount Rushmore of basketball, but I think part of him is still on a mountain somewhere. That's gonna do it for this one. This was a bitch and a half to make, but I wanted to test the limits of 2K23's franchise mode. It was very buggy, but it was interesting. And you tell me, in NBA terms, do white lives matter? Yeah, think about that. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next one.